The year was 1900. Old Main was still in its infancy. Classes were finishing their first term when President Livingston Lord wrote a letter to women's gymnastics teacher Alice Christensen, requesting her to organize basketball as an intramural activity. Competition among students and faculty members comprised the early years, with games contested on the third floor of Old Main in a primitive gymnasium that later housed zoology and botany. The popularity of the game led to the construction of a gymnasium attached to the south end of Pemberton Hall. Nicknamed the Cracker Box, Eastern basketball had its first home in 1909. That same year, football coach Joseph Brown was charged with the responsibility of putting together the first team to record games against off-campus opponents, Charleston High School, Millikan, and the University of Illinois freshman squad. The history of EIU basketball had begun. With the hiring of Charles Lance, the first full-time athletic director and coach, the term intercollegiate was attached to basketball in 1911. Still competing primarily against high school teams, Coach Lance described one memorable contest against Westfield College in which Eastern traveled 8 miles by horse and carriage. Westfield prevailed 29-27, thanks to 27 free throws. Under Lance, men's basketball began to grow as he won 197 games, including the 1926 Little 19 Conference Championship. During the first 3 decades, the team was often referred to as the Blue and Gray. That moniker no longer sufficed. In 1930, a student body contest sponsored by the student newspaper and athletics resulted in a real nickname. Eastern Illinois University became the Panthers. Lance ended his basketball coaching career in 1935, but remained on as athletic director. The Panthers would move from the Cracker Box into the new Lance Gymnasium. Considered state-of-the-art at the time of its opening in 1938, the standalone gym seated 1,800 and was the envy of sister state institutions.
You would have seen where we played at Northern and Normal and Southern. Those gyms were antiquated, and if there was an advantage, it was the length of our gym and the width of our gym.
Place was packed. At some games, when big conference games, rather than the band being up on the stage per se, they would put bleachers up there, and then even along the sidelines here, they'd put 2 rows of chair seats down here. And when the tickets would go on sale, the students would gobble up most of them. But we always played, I think, before a packed house, just about every game.
The fans were great. They were right on top of you, which was great. There wasn't a lot of out of bounds in that gym, but I always enjoyed playing there.
The greatest generation survived a depression, won a world war, and returned to campus for post-war prosperity. EIU basketball would have one of its most successful runs in school history from 1947 to 1953. Leading the charge was head coach Bill Healey.
But he was very laid back. He just let us do our thing, and luckily we had the type of athletes that could do what he wanted to do. I've always said he was more of a diplomat rather than a basketball coach, but he certainly had many winning years. Even our practices were fun. Coach Healey would let us get away with a lot of shenanigans, and we were playing Southern, and the hotels there in Southern were terrible, and Ike Timmons was the bus driver, and anyhow we had to stay over at DuQuoin because they had better facilities there. So anyhow, Ike was a good friend of mine and so forth. He was from Atene, and we got ready to leave the hotel and motel there in DuQuoin, and I said, Ike, I know how to drive a bus. I can drive this. He said, sure, get in there. So it took off from DuQuoin. We got away down the road a few miles, and I think it was Jim Johnson said, "Healey, you know who's driving this bus?" And he came up there, he said, "Get out of there." And then he put Ike back in, and he says, "Well, maybe you can drive it on the way home, but not going over there."
The university community and Charleston were rewarded with 13 straight winning seasons and an incredible 52 straight wins at home. They also made 5 appearances at the national tournament in Kansas City.
The depot was right here in Charleston, and we took the train from here to St. Louis and then changed trains and went on to Kansas City. And then when we come home, we had lots of fans meeting the train. It was quite a novel experience to get on a passenger train here in Charleston, but back then, that was the way it was.
It was also during this time that Eastern Illinois broke the color barrier as Jim Johnson from nearby Brazil, Indiana, became the first African-American player in Panther history.
When we would go to Kansas City and play there, he had to go, he was segregated, he had to go to a different hotel, and we had a hotel that was, well, we walked over to the stadium, and Jim had to be bussed out in the suburbs somewhere where it was an all-black hotel. And, you know, just look back then, and that hadn't been that many years ago, how far we've come, and thank goodness we have come. Jim dealt with everything just admirably well. He was just a remarkable guy, a good friend.
Panther success on the hardwood did not end with Healey, as Coach Bob Carey followed in 1954 and once again guided the Panthers to some memorable games.
We had 2 guards, John Milholland and Frank Wolf, who were very good, very capable. John was a great scorer. Frank, I remember, was very good defensively. And Jerry Heiss and I played the forwards, and Charlie Session played the center. We weren't very big, but we handled the situation pretty well. We could score, and most of us shot pretty well.
Thinking their 1957 season was over, the Panthers received a last-minute call to play in the District 20 tournament, which eventually led them to another trip to the national tournament.
We won our first game rather handily. We won our second game, and at that time the newspapers started calling us the Cinderella team. That gave us more of a boost. So we won our third game, and at that stage, I don't know whether Eastern closed the college because most of the students were out of Kansas City. It was such a lift that they did such a great job. And of course we had Coach Carey and Coach Darling were our coaches and did an exceptional job. John Milholland and I made all tournament team. I think he made the first team, I made the second team. They gave us each a bull of a watch, which was another great momentum.
The team returned home with a 4th place national finish, the highest in EIU history at that time. The next era of Panther basketball would see the closing of Lance Gym. The final game was played against Western Illinois on February 26, 1966. The building was renamed McAfee Gym after women's physical education instructor Florence McAfee. The new Lance Arena, a multi-purpose building, seated 3 times as many spectators as its predecessor. EIU opened their new facility on December 5th of 1966 with a 96-83 victory over Cleveland State. The Don Eddy era of Panther basketball tipped off with the Runnin' Runts in 1969, a small but hustling bunch who endeared themselves to Panther fans.
When Don Eddy and Bud Scott came here in 1968, primarily our coaches were teachers and coaches both, with an emphasis on teaching as much as coaching. they did teach, but when they came here, their expectation were that they were basketball coaches. They went at it 24/7. I think they energized the department. I think people on campus, the students, as well as faculty, people in the community recognized this emphasis now on winning.
In the 1970s, lack of conference affiliation ironically worked in EIU's favor.
The coaches could schedule all of their games, and consequently they were able to schedule 16, 17, 18 home games, which gave us a distinct home court advantage. So we only had, at that time, we would win 90% of our home games, only had to pick up 2 or 3 road wins. We had 20 wins, which got us in the tournament almost automatically. That was the magic number.
The expectation of going to the national tournament brought thousands of enthusiastic fans to Lance Arena.
I can remember it got to the point that we had to keep the doors locked before the game and open them all at a certain time, because the students would come from all directions running in, and they would try to get down on the floor because they wanted to be close to where the action was.
And it was, a small school and tight-knit, and everybody got into it. And then the townspeople got into it, and it was a good time to be at Eastern Illinois University.
We turned out the lights when we introduced the starting lineup, and you could not hear yourself think in there. The din was just deafening with people wanting to cheer on the Panthers, and it started with tip-off and continued right till the end.
The 76 team found themselves stuck at 500 at midseason.
I think as a team we couldn't find our chemistry. Were we a running team? Were we a setup team? And when I got hurt, it took me out of the lineup, and I think it allowed for the team to kind of find everybody, the younger players especially, kind of find themselves, and everybody had to step it up a notch, and they did, and it was a beautiful thing.
On the far side, once again, Scott with the ball. Thomas, again on the dribble, coming back around, feet to Scott, turn around, jump, it's up, and it's good. Scott with 3 in a row on a jump shot 15 to 18 feet out. Once again, Eastern
It all clicked at the right time as Eastern took off on a 15-game winning streak, propelling them to the national tournament.
We won the regional down in Evansville, went right back the next weekend because Evansville also hosted the Final Four. Gilbert Fight, the president, closed the university. It was right on the verge of spring break, so he closed it that weekend, and we had a tremendous following down there. So it was really a neat atmosphere. We were fortunate to be so close to the national tournament.
The Panthers brought home a best-ever third-place trophy, eclipsing the 1957 fourth-place finish.
And say it again, the team, led by seniors Jeff Burry, Brad Warble, Herb Williams, John Day, was one of the finest in the United States.
Led by Charlie Thomas and Craig DeWitt, the 78 team was again in the national spotlight with a season-long sprint to the Final Four.
The 1978 team, I don't think we really knew what to expect. We had senior leadership in the backcourt, but we had some youth up front. So as that team progressed through the year, it became a very, very solid basketball team. Both the 76 and the 78 team were similar without any superstars. Great balance on scoring, great emphasis on defense. It was a typical Don Eddy, Bud Scott team throughout the 70s.
Panther basketball had taken incremental steps for over 70 years. Big changes were on the horizon as the Panthers made the transition from Division II to Division I. Head coach Rick Samuels would become the winningest coach in EIU history with 360 victories during his 25-year tenure.
You want to play at that level of competition, and I wasn't that familiar with Division II. I'd done a little research on Eastern's history in Division II and knew that they'd been very strong and had been a team that had competed for national championships. But moving Division I certainly gave you the chance to do more travel, get around the country. Benefits in terms of financial rewards were greater. The guarantee games, the games that came by virtue of being in an NCAA Division I conference through the TV monies, I think were things that you wanted to be a part of.
Success continued during the mid-1980s with a Mid-Continent Conference Tournament Championship in 1985, paced by 2 NBA draft picks, John Collins and Sir Duck, Kevin Duckworth.
You remember different things about Kevin Duckworth. First of all, I can remember the phone call. We were in desperate need of size in our program. I remember the phone call, Coach, I found you a big kid, but now you got to understand he's really big. You know, you go up and see a kid that was 6'9", and his high school coach said he weighed 330, 340, but a kid who struggled to get up and down the floor, looked out of place until Davey caught the ball, and you know, he had great touch, didn't miss free throws, had a good presence with his back to the basket, and so we felt we had to take a chance on him. I had to talk him out of going home on several occasions, and I finally got to the bottom of the subject. He walked into class, everybody looked at him, and he said, you know, Coach, I know in my mind what they're thinking. They're thinking I can't sit in one of those one-armed desks. And he said, I can't. And so but he grew from that, and because of his size, actually became the most popular kid on campus, and was very proud of that. He'd walk down the sidewalks and the quads, and everybody'd say, hey, Duck, how you doing? And he was very proud of that. And he had a great personality anyway.
The transition to Division I paid off in the early 90s with Eastern's first appearance in the Big Dance.
You coached this sport with a dream to get to the NCAA tournament. They played with a dream to get to the NCAA tournament. Dreams can come true.
The 1992 team started the season with high expectations, winning their first 5 games.
I think we were picked third preseason, but we thought we were a little better than that. We had great senior leadership, Rob McInnes, Barry Johnson, Kevin Martin, and Dave Olson. We're in practice, and you know, the bigs are at one end of the floor and the guards at the other. And I don't know what we were doing some drills, but all of a sudden we heard this thump. Someone hit the floor, and we look over, everyone stopped. We look over, and we see our leader, Rob McInnes, on the floor.
With McInnes out, hopes for a stellar season started to diminish.
We lost some confidence. I mean, we were pretty much win 2, lose 2, that type of deal the rest of the way until we got to our last home game, which was against, I think, Western. And Steve Rowe hit a game-winning shot to win that game 75-73. And that gave us a little momentum going into the conference tournament.
I still remember going to that tournament, I didn't pack enough clothes to stay all the way through the championship game, because I'm thinking there is no way this team can get to the championship game. They would have to beat Wisconsin, Green Bay.
When we got there was a sense of determination that I had never seen before in that group of kids, and really hadn't seen on many basketball teams. And frankly, we played awfully well through that tournament and beat a great Green Bay team. And we were never challenged in the championship game with UIC. I mean, we were clearly for 3 days the best team in the Mid-Continent that year.
In that championship game against UIC, boy, it was a Steve Rowe show. I mean, he really, on national television, he really stood out. And not just him. I remember Dave Olson, I think, was trying to throw an alley-oop, which Dave Olson really can't throw alley-oops. He tried to throw alley-oop, and it went in the basket. You know, he's one of the best three-point shooters that this school's ever seen, and they counted it as a three-point shot. So things started to go our way, but from start to finish, I think we led the entire game.
The win would put the 92 team in the history books as the first Panther team to play in an NCAA Division I tournament. The 2001 Panthers rocked Lance Gym with an undefeated home season. That excitement continued in the OVC tournament and the final game as the Panthers squared off against rival Austin Peay.
Eastern was having a bad day. Matt Britton wasn't 100%. It looked like it was all kind of slipping away. You know, bad day to have a bad day.
And then one of the things that Coach talked about at halftime was we're not really showing how good we can play. Forget the score, forget, you know, winning or losing the game, but let's just go out in the second half and just play like we're capable of playing.
And I think Troy Collier, my assistant, kind of put us on this. He said, let's not think of in terms of the end of the game, guys. He said, let's think in 2 to 3 minute increments. He said, let's try to cut it to 14 in the next 3 minutes. And by the next time out, let's try to get it down to 10. And by the next time out to, you know, under 10. And
holds it. Britton Gets to the hill, going backdoor, a fake, one dribble, 18-footer, no good. Thompson, rebound, block, goaltended, it's over.
The second half would prove to be one of the most incredible comebacks in college basketball history. The win became an instant ESPN classic. The story made the front page of USA Today, followed by an article in Sports Illustrated. The 2001 season would be the only time in the history of the NCAA that two players from the same team were ranked in the top 5 scorers nationally, Henry Damerkant and Kyle Hill. Damerkant finished his career at Eastern, setting both EIU and Ohio Valley Conference career scoring records. He scored 2,602 career points and is ranked in the top 30 for career NCAA scorers. Coach Mike Miller is honored with the distinction of leading the Panthers into the next century of EIU basketball. He and his players accept the responsibility of continuing a legacy of 100 years of championship teams.
For me, this is very special for me, especially. It's my last year, it's my senior year, so I look at this as being something amazing, you know. That's a great chance for me, and I'm really happy to be part of that.
No one sums up 100 years of Panther championship basketball better than longtime play-by-play broadcaster Mike Brad.
I guess the main thing that stands out is just an awful lot of classy people over the years that I've been involved with it. Really classy coaches, really classy kids, kids that represent the university well, kids that work hard, kids that, like I say, are good representatives, that have made themselves into good people, have had good careers, good families. People you can be proud of. I can honestly say in the years I've been involved that I just about can't recall an incident where you weren't proud of what was going on with those guys that were wearing Eastern Illinois across the front of the jersey.
On February 27, 2010, Eastern celebrated 100 years of basketball with a special reunion of past players and coaches. The participants were honored earlier in the day with a special banquet and again during halftime at the men's basketball game. Here are the 10 members of Eastern's All-Century team. Andy Sullivan, 1942 to 1946. A multi-sport star who played before and after World War II, Andy Sullivan was a dominant scorer in the Interstate Intercollegiate Athletic Conference and twice was recognized for his athletic accomplishments by being selected team captain by his teammates and coaches. Tom Katsimpoulos, 1949 to 1952. Tom Katsimpoulos, who led the Panthers to 4 straight postseason tournaments, was the first Panther to earn both All-American honors and NBA status as a 7th-round draft choice. He was also Eastern's all-time scoring leader upon graduation in 1952 and still ranks at number 7 on the career list. John Milholland, 1956 to 1958. John Milholland is one of the most prolific point producers in Panther history and was cited for his scoring achievements by being chosen All-Conference 3 times. John's 653 points led the 1957 team to a 4th-place finish in the NAIA National Tournament. Charlie Thomas, 1975 to 1978. Charlie Thomas's pinpoint perimeter shooting was a key contributor to the 1976 and 1978 teams, finishing 3rd in the NCAA Division II national tournaments. Playing in an era before the three-point shot, Thomas still ranks as the number 8 all-time scoring leader in Panther history. Craig DeWitt, 1977 to 1980. Craig DeWitt was double trouble on both ends of the floor, ranking as just one of 2 players to be in the top 10 in both scoring and rebounding. A 2-time Division II All-American, Craig was a 4-year starter who led the Panthers to 4 NCAA Division II tournaments, including a third-place finish in 1978. Kevin Duckworth, 1983 to 1986. Nicknamed Sir Duck, 7-foot Kevin Duckworth's soft shooting touch and gentle spirit left a legacy that will be difficult to duplicate at Eastern Illinois. The 33rd pick in the 1986 NBA draft, Duckworth distinguished himself with an 11-year NBA career and 2-time NBA All-Star recognition. John Collins, 1983 to 1986. When it comes to smooth, John Collins ranks at the top of the list. With no flamboyance, Collins dominated the Mid-Continent Conference by twice being named Player of the Year, emerging his senior year as the all-time scoring leader and still ranks 4th overall. His achievements earned him a 5th-round draft selection by the Denver Nuggets. Jay Taylor, 1986 to 1989. In the post, in the paint, or on the perimeter, Jay Taylor was a threat to score every time he put his hands on the basketball. A 2-time All-American and Mid-Continent Conference Player of the Year, Jay is still the number 2 all-time scorer, 20 years after his career concluded. Kyle Hill, 1998 to 2001. Kyle Hill's cat-quick shots from the wing and finesse in the lane guided the Panthers to the 2001 NCAA tournament. Hill made the nationwide basketball followers take notice as he finished number 2 in NCAA scoring as a senior, was drafted in the 2nd round, second highest NBA pick ever, and has continued an illustrious professional career in Europe for the past 8 years. Henry Dahmerkant, 2000 to 2003. Oh, Henry! Henry Dahmerkant etched his name among the all-time greats in college basketball lore by finishing 25th on the NCAA all-time scoring list and still ranks 30th overall on that prestigious list. He is still the Ohio Valley Conference all-time scoring leader and continues to excel in his 7th season playing professionally in Europe.